In the closing weeks of last year, one of the world's most powerful shipping corporations made headlines. Mitsui O.S.K. Lines, a Japanese maritime giant with a fleet that spans every major ocean, committed nearly $2 billion to a single purchase: 6 cutting-edge liquefied natural gas carriers from a Chinese shipbuilder. The deal represented confidence, ambition, and the recognition of China's unmatched capabilities in modern shipbuilding. But then something unexpected happened. Just months after signing that massive contract, Mitsui O.S.K. Lines shocked the industry by announcing they would completely halt future orders with Chinese shipyards. No new vessels, no new partnerships. The message was clear. One of Asia's shipping powerhouses was walking away from the world's largest shipbuilder. The question everyone started asking was simple but profound. Why would Japan suddenly turn its back on China's shipbuilding industry? The answer lies not in Tokyo, but in Washington, and it reveals a high-stakes economic battle that could reshape global trade, maritime power, and the future of manufacturing itself. Mitsui O.S.K. Lines, a Japanese maritime giant with a fleet that spans every major ocean, committed nearly $2 billion to a single purchase: 6 cutting-edge liquefied natural gas carriers from a Chinese shipbuilder. The deal represented confidence, ambition, and the recognition of China's unmatched capabilities in modern shipbuilding. But then something unexpected happened. Just months after signing that massive contract, Mitsui O.S.K. Lines shocked the industry by announcing they would completely halt future orders with Chinese shipyards. No new vessels, no new partnerships. The message was clear. One of Asia's shipping powerhouses was walking away from the world's largest shipbuilder. The question everyone started asking was simple but profound. Why would Japan suddenly turn its back on China's shipbuilding industry? The answer lies not in Tokyo, but in Washington. And it reveals a high-stakes economic battle that could reshape global trade, maritime power, and the future of manufacturing itself. The fee that changed everything. On April 17th of this year, the United States government unveiled a policy that sent shockwaves through the maritime world. They announced a new harbor maintenance fee specifically targeting vessels constructed in Chinese shipyards. This wasn't a minor administrative adjustment. This was economic warfare disguised as port policy. Here's how it works. Any shipping company operating a Chinese-built vessel that docks at an American port would now face substantial fees. These charges are calculated using whichever figure is higher, either the ship's net tonnage or its container capacity. In some cases, a single port visit could trigger fees reaching up to $1.5 million. But there's more to this story. Ships built in the United States, or in what Washington calls allied nations like South Korea, would receive fee reductions or complete exemptions. The carrot and the stick, applied with surgical precision. The strategic intent behind this policy is transparent. First, it aims to breathe life into America's struggling domestic shipbuilding sector, an industry that has been in steep decline for decades. Second, and perhaps more importantly, it seeks to undermine China's dominant position in the global shipbuilding market. But this raises a critical question that policymakers in Washington may not have fully considered. Can a port fee really stop the momentum of an industrial giant that has spent decades building the world's most advanced shipbuilding infrastructure? And if companies like Mitsui O.S.K. Lines stop ordering from China, where exactly will those multi-billion-dollar contracts go? From nothing to number one. China's remarkable journey. To understand the magnitude of what's at stake, we need to rewind the clock 6 decades. In the early 1960s, China's shipbuilding industry barely existed in any meaningful sense. The country lacked modern maritime construction technology, faced severe capital constraints, and struggled to assemble even a basic workforce trained in naval engineering. The transformation began in earnest in 1997, when Chinese authorities made a pivotal investment. They paid over $5 million to acquire membrane LNG ship technology from Gaz Transport and Technigaz, a French company at the forefront of specialized vessel design. This wasn't just buying blueprints, it was purchasing a pathway to the future. For years, Chinese engineers and researchers worked tirelessly to adapt, improve, and ultimately master this complex technology. By 2018, more than 2 decades after that initial investment, China successfully produced and delivered its first domestically designed LNG carrier. That single vessel represented more than just engineering achievement. It symbolized China's entry into the highest tier of global shipbuilding. What happened next stunned industry observers worldwide. By 2010, China's shipbuilding output reached an extraordinary 65.6 million deadweight tons, representing a year-over-year growth of more than 54%. New orders flooded in, totaling over 75 million deadweight tons, with export vessels accounting for nearly 85% of the total. That year marked a historic turning point. For the first time ever, China surpassed both Japan and South Korea across the 3 critical metrics that define shipbuilding supremacy: completion volume, new orders received, and order backlog. China had become the world's #1 shipbuilder. But that was just the beginning. Fast forward to 2024, and the numbers tell an even more remarkable story. Chinese shipyards secured orders totaling 65.8 million compensated gross tons, representing an astonishing 71% of global ship orders. This figure represents a 34% increase compared to the previous year. Major Chinese shipbuilding companies now hold order backlogs exceeding 28.7 million deadweight tons. Consider this example. Denmark, a nation with one of the world's most sophisticated maritime sectors, placed an order with Chinese shipyards this year for 40 LNG dual-fuel container ships. The total value? $8 billion. If current trends continue uninterrupted, analysts project that China could control more than 80% of worldwide ship orders within the next few years. This isn't just market leadership. This is approaching market monopoly. When Donald Trump returned to the White House, he and his advisors quickly identified what they viewed as a strategic vulnerability: China's expanding dominance across multiple industrial sectors: semiconductors, electric vehicles, renewable energy, and yes, shipbuilding. The response was swift and multifaceted. The administration imposed sweeping tariffs on Chinese imports, in some cases reaching 245%. They banned exports of advanced semiconductor technology to Chinese companies. And they set their sights on one of China's proudest achievements, its shipbuilding industry. The harbor maintenance fee announced in April isn't just another tariff. It's a calculated attempt to make Chinese-built ships economically unviable for companies that regularly access American ports. The policy was designed with a timeline. Full implementation would begin in October, giving shipping companies just months to adjust their strategies. Interestingly, the policy even called on Chinese shipping companies themselves to actively cooperate with these new restrictions, a request that revealed either remarkable optimism or a fundamental misunderstanding of the geopolitical dynamics at play. So what exactly is Washington trying to achieve with this harbor fee? The policy document reveals a 2-tiered approach. During an initial 180-day grace period, the fees would remain at 0, giving the industry time to prepare. But starting October 14th, the real impact would begin. Any vessel operated by Chinese companies or constructed in Chinese shipyards would face a maritime service charge of $50 per net ton. This isn't a one-time payment. The fees are structured to increase progressively year over year, creating mounting financial pressure over time. But perhaps the most revealing aspect of this policy is a specific mandate. By April 2028, at least 1% of all vessels used for liquefied natural gas exports from the United States must be American-built ships. This target seems modest until you consider a striking fact. Approximately 17% of the transport vessels currently operating in American waters were actually built by Chinese companies. Washington is essentially asking the industry to reverse decades of practical business decisions based on cost, quality, and availability. The impact of America's policy became tangible in May, when Mitsui O.S.K. Lines made its stunning announcement. The company would suspend all new orders with Chinese shipyards indefinitely. This wasn't a minor adjustment. According to the company's strategic plan, they had intended to expand their fleet of LNG-fueled vessels constructed in China to approximately 90 ships by 2030. They had already signed construction agreements for 6 major vessels with Chinese shipbuilders, including 2 massive 309,000-ton LNG dual-fuel, very large crude carriers, and 4 210,000-ton LNG dual-fuel bulk carriers. The combined value exceeded $1.8 billion. Let's put these vessels in perspective. A 309,000-ton VLCC represents some of the most advanced maritime engineering in the world. These aren't just big ships. They're floating technological marvels designed to transport enormous quantities of crude oil while using liquefied natural gas as their primary fuel source. The environmental benefits are substantial. Compared to traditional fuel-powered vessels, these ships reduce carbon dioxide emissions by 25 to 30%. Nitrogen oxide emissions drop by approximately 85%. They comfortably exceed the strictest international maritime environmental standards, specifically the Energy Efficiency Design Index Phase 3 requirements. The 4 bulk carriers are equally impressive. Their fuel economy surpasses international baseline values by 44%. Sulfur oxide emissions are reduced by more than 90%, while nitrogen oxide emissions fall by over 20%. Operating in pure gas mode, these vessels can complete 2 round trips between China and Australia, or a single journey along the China-Pakistan route without refueling. They represent the cutting edge of sustainable maritime transport. But now, because of pressure from Washington's harbor fee policy, Japan felt compelled to walk away. These multi-billion-dollar orders would need to find new homes. But where? This brings us to the central question. Can the United States actually revive its dormant shipbuilding industry by suppressing China's capabilities? The data paints a sobering picture. Currently, the American shipbuilding industry accounts for less than 0.1% of the global market. Meanwhile, China commands over 40%, and South Korea holds nearly 30%. The gap isn't just significant, it's almost incomprehensible. American shipbuilding faces multiple structural challenges that can't be resolved with policy declarations alone. First, there's the cost problem. Building ships in the United States is extraordinarily expensive compared to anywhere else in the world. Take a standard 174,000 cubic meter LNG carrier as an example. Chinese shipyards can construct such a vessel for approximately $200 million. In the United States, the same ship might cost $300 million or more, a premium of 30 to 50%. For shipping companies operating on thin profit margins in a brutally competitive global market, this price difference isn't just inconvenient. It's potentially business-destroying. Then there's the delivery timeline issue. Major Chinese and South Korean shipyards can typically deliver an LNG carrier within 24 to 36 months from order to completion. American shipyards generally require 36 to 48 months, and sometimes even longer. In an industry where timing is everything, where delays can mean millions in lost revenue and missed contracts, this extended construction period represents a critical competitive disadvantage. The scale difference is equally stark. The largest container ship currently under construction in an American shipyard has a capacity equivalent to 3,600 standard containers. This falls far short of the average carrying capacity of vessels that regularly dock at U.S. ports in 2024. China's current shipbuilding capacity is estimated to be 232 times larger than America's entire industry. Consider the dependency that major international carriers have developed on Chinese manufacturing. Approximately 70% of new ship orders globally are fulfilled by Chinese shipyards. Denmark's Maersk, one of the world's most prestigious shipping companies, has about 14% of its entire container fleet built in China. CMA CGM, the world's third-largest container shipping company, sources up to 36% of its capacity from Chinese shipyards. These aren't minor relationships. They're fundamental dependencies that have evolved over decades based on rational economic calculation. South Korea, the unexpected beneficiary. When Mitsui O.S.K. Lines and other companies began redirecting orders away from Chinese shipyards, many industry observers expected the business to flow toward American manufacturers. But, well, that's not what happened. Instead, South Korean shipbuilders became the primary beneficiaries. Many analysts now predict that South Korea, not the United States, will be the true winner of Washington's harbor fee policy. But is this sustainable? South Korea's shipbuilding prowess isn't new. Back in the early 1980s, the country's annual production capacity surged from 2.8 million tons to 4 million tons, driven primarily by what was then the famous Hyundai Heavy Industries shipyard. By the late 1990s, South Korea operated 7 shipyards with annual production capacities exceeding 1 million tons each. They had successfully overtaken Japan to become the world's leading shipbuilding nation. But the crown proved temporary. China was coming. Today, China operates approximately 50 large shipyards, with more than 30 capable of producing over 1 million tons annually. The country also possesses 70 large dry docks, with capacities exceeding 100,000 tons, including several giant facilities rated at 300,000 tons and even 500,000 tons. In terms of pure infrastructure, China has pulled far ahead of South Korea. South Korea's position is further complicated by a critical vulnerability: supply chain dependence. Currently, between 25 and 30% of the components and raw materials used by South Korean shipyards come from China. This includes everything from basic steel to sophisticated marine equipment. This creates a paradoxical situation. South Korean shipyards receiving orders diverted from Chinese competitors are still dependent on Chinese suppliers for essential materials. If tensions between Beijing and Washington escalate further, South Korean manufacturers could find themselves trapped in the middle, unable to fulfill orders without Chinese components. There's another immediate problem: capacity constraints. Major South Korean shipyards currently have order books filled through 2027 or even 2028. When companies like Mitsui O.S.K. Lines redirect their multi-billion-dollar contracts to South Korea, it doesn't magically create more production capacity. Instead, it extends waiting times and increases delivery pressure. The financial implications are already visible. The cost of building an LNG carrier in South Korea has risen from approximately $220 million last year to about $250 million today, an increase of more than 13% in just 12 months. While still cheaper than American options, this price is creeping closer to the point where the cost advantage becomes marginal. Despite the immediate disruption caused by American policy, China's shipbuilding industry retains 3 fundamental advantages that will be extraordinarily difficult to overcome. The first is cost leadership. Chinese shipyards can still build LNG carriers for 10 to 15% less than South Korean competitors, and 30 to 50% less than American facilities. This isn't just about cheaper labor. It reflects decades of infrastructure investment, supply chain optimization, and manufacturing expertise. Second is efficiency and speed. Chinese construction timelines for LNG carriers have been compressed from 30 months to approximately 24 months, with some facilities achieving even faster completion rates. In an industry where time literally equals money, this operational efficiency translates directly into competitive advantage. Third is technological mastery. Chinese shipbuilders have now achieved complete command of multiple mainstream technical approaches, including membrane-type LNG vessels and prismatic LNG carriers. They're no longer dependent on foreign technology licensing or expertise. They can design, engineer, and construct the most sophisticated vessels entirely in-house. But perhaps the most important factor protecting China's shipbuilding industry isn't technical at all. It's geographic and economic. China is currently the world's largest importer of liquefied natural gas, purchasing approximately 70 million tons annually. This massive domestic demand requires a substantial fleet of specialized carriers, and Beijing naturally prioritizes Chinese shipyards for these contracts. This provides a stable order base that's largely insulated from American policy pressure. Furthermore, not all international shipping companies operate primarily in American waters. Carriers whose routes focus on Asia, the Middle East, and other regions that rarely include U.S. port calls may continue choosing Chinese shipyards without facing financial penalties. For these companies, the superior value proposition of Chinese manufacturing remains compelling. According to recent statistics, Chinese shipyards captured approximately 35% of global LNG carrier orders in 2023. Early data from this year suggests this might decline to around 25%, a significant drop but hardly a collapse. China remains by far the largest single producer of these sophisticated vessels. The Trump administration's strategy to revitalize American shipbuilding through punitive fees on Chinese-built vessels represents an ambitious attempt at industrial policy. But ambition alone doesn't overcome structural economic realities. The fundamental challenge is this: you cannot simply decree a competitive shipbuilding industry into existence. It requires massive capital investment, decades of workforce development, sophisticated supply chains, and most importantly, actual customers willing to accept higher prices and longer delivery times. American shipyards would need billions of dollars in modernization investments just to approach the efficiency levels of Chinese and South Korean competitors. They would need to train thousands of specialized workers in skills that have largely disappeared from the American manufacturing base. They would need to develop supply networks for components that are often only available from Asian manufacturers. All of this takes time measured in decades, not policy cycles. Meanwhile, Chinese shipbuilders aren't standing still. They continue investing in automation, artificial intelligence applications, and advanced materials. They're developing next-generation vessel designs optimized for environmental sustainability and operational efficiency. The technological gap, rather than narrowing, may actually be widening. The harbor maintenance fee policy might succeed in redirecting some orders away from Chinese shipyards in the short term, particularly for shipping companies with heavy exposure to American ports. But it's unlikely to achieve the broader strategic objective: genuinely reviving American shipbuilding as a competitive global industry. South Korea may capture some diverted business, but they face their own constraints around capacity and supply chain vulnerability. Japanese shipbuilders, once the world's leaders, have largely exited the mass production market in favor of specialized, high-value vessels. European yards focus on luxury cruise ships and naval vessels rather than the commercial cargo carriers that dominate global trade. This leaves an uncomfortable truth. The global shipping industry has structured itself around Chinese manufacturing capabilities because those capabilities represent the optimal combination of cost, quality, and delivery time. Unwinding this reality through policy interventions is far more difficult than creating it was in the first place. As we look toward the future, several scenarios seem possible. In the most optimistic case for Washington, the harbor fees succeed in creating enough economic incentive that some shipbuilding capacity gradually returns to the United States. American yards modernize, efficiency improves, and a modest but viable domestic industry emerges over the next decade. Chinese market share declines somewhat, but remains dominant globally while completely controlling Asian markets. In a more likely scenario, the policy creates disruption without fundamentally altering the competitive landscape. Some orders shift to South Korea, creating temporary windfalls for Korean manufacturers while straining their capacity. Chinese shipyards lose some American-focused business, but compensate through domestic demand and orders from companies operating primarily in other markets. American shipyards see minimal revival beyond perhaps some military or specialized government contracts. In the worst case, the policy backfires entirely. Shipping costs for American imports and exports rise as companies pass along the additional fees to customers. This contributes to inflation and makes American goods less competitive in global markets. South Korean yards, overwhelmed with diverted orders, raise prices to manage demand. Chinese shipbuilders, freed from price competition for American market access, focus entirely on Asian and European customers while continuing to innovate and reduce costs. The maritime industry, perhaps more than any other, reveals the limits of economic nationalism in a deeply interconnected global economy. Ships don't respect borders. They're designed to cross them, and the companies that own these vessels make decisions based on economic logic, not political preference. This battle over shipbuilding fees and market share is really about something much larger: the ongoing struggle between the United States and China for technological and economic leadership in the 21st century. China's rise in shipbuilding mirrors its trajectory in solar panels, electric vehicles, high-speed rail, and telecommunications equipment. In each case, the pattern is similar: initial technology transfer or acquisition, years of intensive domestic research and development, massive state-supported investment in production capacity, and eventual market dominance through superior cost and scale. American policymakers view this pattern with alarm, seeing each Chinese industrial success as a strategic vulnerability. The response has been increasingly aggressive trade measures designed to protect American industries and slow Chinese advancement. But here's the fundamental tension. Global markets don't care about national security frameworks. They respond to price, quality, and reliability. When Chinese manufacturers offer superior value across these dimensions, customers will find ways to access that value, even in the face of policy barriers. The shipbuilding conflict ultimately asks a question that extends far beyond maritime industries. In an age of global supply chains and international competition, can any nation successfully wall off its domestic market from more efficient foreign producers? And even if they can, should they? The American approach bets that short-term economic pain, higher costs, longer delivery times, reduced options, will eventually yield long-term strategic gains through restored domestic industrial capacity.